Hi, friends and fellow YouTubers. Dr. Anthony Donovan here again. Welcome back to H2O Proof Your Leadership. And today I'm really excited to talk about one of my favorite topics about how to be a better supervisor. Look, I got to be honest. I've grown a lot as a supervisor. I hope that I'm a better supervisor than I was a few years ago even, but it's something I'm always trying to refine, and I'm always trying to figure out how to be better at it. And so I'm always listening for ways to help me be a better supervisor and think about the things that I've done that have worked and sometimes the things that haven't. And I've always tried to think about it and present it in a way that makes it easy for people to remember and also maybe implement. And so today, I want to give you 19 easy ways to be a better supervisor. Okay, so I'm not promising you that this is earth-shaking things, but sometimes the best things are the things that the simplest things that we need to be reminded of. And so that's my goal, hopefully today, is to give you some really simple, easy ways to be able to improve your supervision. Number one, and I think this is probably the most important thing that I can tell you, which is in order to be a better supervisor, you need to let people into your life. If you're gonna be in a business where you're developing people, and let's be fair, I think most places need a good supervisor who can develop their people into being better, especially when turnover. You're going to have somebody who comes in brand new, and you're going to have to help them grow and develop. Sometimes you're going to have to take chances on somebody who maybe doesn't have the skill set yet that you hope them to be. Sometimes you're going to have people who need to be motivated a little bit more because they've been here for a while and they've lost a little bit of the energy of that. But you can't do that if you're not going to allow people to be involved in your life. And the reason is, if you're going to be expected to be messy with people in their lives, you have to allow them to sort of muddle around in your life as well. And I'm a big believer that in order to do that, you have to let people in. And it's going to get a little messy. But so if you can find a way to allow, that doesn't mean that you have inappropriate boundaries or necessarily, but I think sometimes sharing your own struggle a little bit appropriately, especially when it relates to work or something like that. And this is hopefully my point here too, which is, hey, I'm trying to share with you some of the experiences and successes and failures that I've had to help you be able to be a little bit better at it. So I'm trying to live out exactly what I'm doing. And I really believe that the relationships that we develop with people is the thing that allows us to be the most potent in their lives, to really impact them in a way that allows them to grow and develop. I don't think we change anyone. I think people make the choice to change. What I do and what you do as a supervisor is we create the opportunity for people to see the need to change, the benefit to change, or maybe even the urgency that needs to happen in order to change. Then they ultimately make that decision to change. And that's really important because that's the only kind of change that I think lasts. If people change because I force them to change, I don't think that's the kind of permanent change that I want to have happen. And it's more than likely eventually they'll slip back. That changes. I've said change about 1,000 times here, but that affects people differently when you allow them to be involved in your life, and they'll allow you in turn to be in their lives. So number one, let people into your life. Number two, easy way to be a better supervisor, allow people to have expectations of you. I think we all know, like the boss, right? You're going to have expectations. Everybody expects your boss to have expectations of you. But a lot of bosses don't allow people to have expectations of them. I want to allow people to have expectations of me, not just simply because I want them to like me or whatever. I want them to know how I'm going to react. I also like it when I allow people to have expectations because it holds me accountable to trying to live those things out better and well. I'm not particularly a yeller kind of person, and so I tell people all the time, you can expect me not to yell at you. I'm not going to yell at you when you make a mistake. I sometimes tell people, I'm not going to be angry when you call me at home, especially. And so you'd be amazed at how little things like that happen. Some people, they worry about, well, if I let my employees call me at home, they're going to call me all the time and abuse it. I'm just going to be honest with you. When you set that expectation up and you let people have it and you talk through it, it self-polices it. People do the right thing. They're probably more worried about disturbing me than I'm worried about them disturbing me. And they're always very kind. And so I like it when I can allow people to have some expectations of me, and everybody can make that clear. And I think it makes it easier when you allow people to have expectations of you, for them to accept that you have expectations of them. And so allowing people to have expectations of you, really super easy way to be able to be successful as a boss. Don't be afraid of firing people. Now, look, if you watch one of our sessions on energy management, I talk a lot about firing. Here's the funny thing about firing. Some people get really freaked out about it, and they get really worried about it. But some of the things is that there's some real tremendous things about firing. But let's talk about before you get to the place where you fire people. Look, firing should be one of the least pleasant things that you have to do. You should never like it. I've fired lots of people. I don't tell you that I've ever enjoyed it. Sometimes it really twists my stomach and knots. I worry about it. I hate it. Look, I work in a field where when I fire somebody, it affects more than just simply their job. It also affects where they live and their families and every other thing. Sometimes there are people who work at the university too, and their family works there too. And so it's a complicated place. Firing somebody shouldn't be something you do lightly. I've never done it lightly, but I've tried not to be afraid of it. The reason that I can feel good about that is that, look, before I fire somebody, before we've done something like that, I spent the time asking myself, did I do the things that I needed to do to help that person be successful? Did I give them the opportunities they needed to be successful? Have I made them aware of the consequences of not making these changes or making these improvements? And then I've also given them an opportunity to show me those improvements, unless it's just something completely heinous or illegal or immoral. Generally speaking, people are going to get the opportunity to try to improve and show me that improvement. And that helps me go to this one other point, to number 3, which is, if you're going to expect improvement, expect it to be obvious and immediate. Some of the biggest things that people make a mistake about is that they let the people have the long term view of making improvement. When I ask somebody to improve, I want to make sure that I see that immediately and it's obvious. I want to see that it doesn't mean that they fix it completely right there in the moment, or that it's got it, or maybe that they even slip back a little bit occasionally. What I want to see them is moving forward if I can. I want to see momentum for it. I want to see obvious improvement. Maybe not complete, but I want to see that, because let's be honest, when you first have that conversation with somebody about needing to improve, that's your best chance for somebody to show you and get it. And if they don't show those things, it probably means they didn't get it, or maybe they're not capable of it. So I want to make sure that happens when I talk to somebody about improving. I want to make sure it's very obvious, and I want to make sure it's immediate, and I want to see evidence of that. I also want to be very careful. The trap that sometimes people have with firing is they think that they think that improvement is the same as effort. How many times have you seen somebody try something real hard but not get any better at it? So those are sometimes the hardest conversations to have when you're trying to help somebody make an improvement in their performance. But they give you plenty of effort, but they can't improve. That's usually a sign that this is probably beyond their ability to improve in. And then you have to make the really hard decision about, do I want to keep this person or hang on to them? Here's the other thing about firing. Look, rarely ever do I see firing end up being something worse than what I did with the other person. That's the thing that's funny, is that generally speaking, the worst thing that can happen when you fire somebody is not that you're going to get somebody worse, because that just usually doesn't happen. What usually happens is that you get somebody who's better, maybe even a little bit better, sometimes a whole lot better. And let's be honest, if we're going to have to choose the amount of energy and the kinds of energy we spend on somebody, wouldn't you rather spend that energy on helping somebody new be the best version of themselves, or improving or learning the job, than somebody that you've already poured tons of energy into and they still don't seem to get it, and maybe in some cases won't ever get it? I'm a big believer that we shouldn't be afraid of firing people. It's not something that I want to say that we want to do with glee, but it's definitely something I want to make sure that I'm not afraid of. Sometimes one of the best things that I can do for one of my other supervisors that I supervise is encourage them to say, it's okay, and it's time for us to let this person go. And it's going to be hard, it's going to be difficult, but at the end of the day, after we let that person go, you're going to be in a better place to put your energy into somebody that is going to really do well for you, or could do well for you. And sometimes I have to tell them that and give them permission to say, look, it's okay. It's going to be, it's nothing to worry about. Some people are just so worried about what will happen to their team if they fire somebody. And I've just come to find that sometimes that person who you're firing and letting go is dragging your team down so badly that, taken away from the weight of that, teams start to prosper and they succeed or they overperform. And as a result of having this person there, sometimes people who maybe didn't perform as well as you want, now all of a sudden get a little extra attention because you have the ability to do that. And now they succeed and they overachieve. And you very quickly find that you've made up the loss of that person who was not performing well, who might in fact be taking away from your team's performance. If nothing else, that they were dragging it, slowing it down, or maybe not giving as much. And so don't be afraid to fire people. I think it can be a really good thing sometimes. I've been trying to think about, in my time as an employee, how many times I've heard my boss say any one of these 3 phrases. I was wrong, I'm sorry, and I made a mistake. If I can be really honest with you, I've not heard these phrases enough. I've not heard of them enough from the bosses that I've worked for, and in some cases, I've never heard of them at all. Now, that's not to suggest that they've never been wrong or that they didn't make a mistake or that they shouldn't be sorry. But I don't hear those things from them. But I believe they are such an essential thing to say as a supervisor, to be okay with them. If for no other reason, then you want to model what you want from the people that work for you when they make mistakes, when they're sorry, when they've done something wrong. You want them to be able to see that you can do the same thing. And when you can model that for them, it makes it easier for them to know that it's okay to do those things and to say those things too as well. I want to be that kind of boss. I really feel myself challenged to say that. And it's given me great openings with people sometimes when I've been able to say, look, I made a mistake. I was wrong, and I'm sorry for it. Maybe they weren't earth-shaking things, but just the sheer fact that I would be willing to say those things sometimes have reframed our relationship and made it easier for us to continue to work together, even in the face of maybe something that was difficult. I think it's really important to be able to use those phrases as a supervisor. Number 5, every time you meet with an employee, write one sentence about that meeting. I think this is crucial. It's a really simple thing. A lot of us don't like to keep tons of notes, and sometimes we have so many meetings with people, it's hard to keep track and remember everything that we did. But if you take this little tip and you just write one little sentence, maybe 2 sentences about that meeting, when you start to look back at those things, you're going to start to see patterns of discussions. Maybe it's some patterns of performance that are good, even. Sometimes it's patterns of performance that are poor. Sometimes you're going to see that you spent a ton of energy in this person on this topic. Sometimes you're going to say, oh, this person really, truly needs some help in this area, and maybe I need to give them some more training. Or sometimes it can be, look, you're making the case for somebody needing to leave, and it escalates a little further, and you're thinking about letting someone go. Those little sentences can be a great way to document the development of this conversation with somebody, leading to their maybe ultimately them leaving your work. This can be really invaluable to you, and it's such a good thing, and it can be very positive too, especially at times when you're doing evaluations and you're trying to figure out all the good things that this person does. If I write a quick sentence that said that, Jim did a great job on A, I have that to go back to looking at many months later when I'm trying to do that person's evaluation. It's such a simple thing, and I think it's such an important thing to do. And it's a great technique for people who are brand new supervisors trying to learn how to be able to have the materials to do things like evaluations and to have performance reviews and to be able to do coaching for people. It will give you really valuable insights, I think. Number 6, you ever work for a boss who just sets these arbitrary deadlines and they're just impossible to meet and everybody's constantly failing to meet them? Or have you ever worked for the boss that just there's no deadlines and nobody ever really knows when something's due and everybody's asking each other when it's due and whatever? Look, I think this is a simple thing, but my goodness, you need to set, as the supervisor, set clear deadlines, but you need to set them. I think about deadlines a lot like pasta. You want to have al dente pasta, right? You want your pasta to be firm but fully cooked, right? The same thing for your deadlines. You want your deadlines and your pasta to be fully thought out. You want them also to be firm, and that they can be successful. So I find that people work better when you give them a very reasonable deadline. Sometimes when I'm setting up a deadline, I say, hey, I was thinking about this deadline. Does that work for everybody? If it doesn't, tell me now. And sometimes I think I set better deadlines because we engage people in that. It's also good when I set that and I set the expectation so that if somebody fails in those deadlines, I can also know that we have the opportunity to discuss it. I didn't arbitrarily set them, that we've had that discussion, we've thought about them, and then we set them together so they were al dente, right? They were clearly thought out, they were firm, but they were fully cooked too as well. And so I want my deadlines like my pasta. Number 7, this might cause a little bit of a controversy maybe, but I believe it's important that you don't be afraid to show that you're angry sometimes. Now, I think there's a difference between anger and madness or mad. I try not to be mad. I tend to think of mad as emotional. Sometimes, when somebody's crazy, they say they're mad, right? I tend to think that anger is more grounded in logic, whereas madness is sort of grounded in emotion. I don't want to react out of emotion. Sometimes we do, right? We're all human. But if I had to be choose, I'd rather be angry. But I also think it's important not to completely hide that. I don't want people, I think when you're mad, you have the tendency to lash out at people with your madness. When you're angry, it tends to be pretty more well directed, maybe at the right place, the right person, maybe the right situation, because again, it's logic dictating it. I think also anger is easier to get over, right? I mean, I don't have a high tolerance to maintain anger. I can't do it for a really long time, but I can do it enough. And sometimes I've had to let people know that, hey, look, I'm angry because this thing is really important. This thing it means a lot. There are real consequences to the things that we do. And if people never understand that or ever feel that, sometimes when things get hard or difficult, they don't have the ability to persevere because they don't think it's important enough. At the same time, when you're always mad at something, sometimes people, they lose the connection to it. They lose the validity of something. So when people can see that you're clearly angry because it's based on a logical reason, I think it's different. It has a different power. You don't want to be the boss that's always mad, but it's okay to be the boss that's occasionally angry when things don't go right. I've said this before when talking about how to be supervised better, is to help understand that friendship and supervision are not the same. You as a supervisor, it's important to remember that too, that those two things can coexist, but they aren't one and the same. And what you can do as a supervisor is be aware of it. And let me be honest, most supervisors, they know they're the boss. The harder thing is to know when you don't need to be the boss. Sometimes you have to take that hat off. Sometimes you have to put your friendship hat on. And sometimes you have to realize that that's okay, that it's okay to be a friend in this moment. Sometimes that's what people need. Sometimes the last thing they need for you to do is be the boss. Now, some of it, again, depends on the depth of your relationships and goes back to point number one. How much did you let people in? When you have people you've let in, the advantages of that is it gives you those opportunities. It makes it clear when this is a moment where being a friend makes sense. This is a moment where being the boss or the supervisor is the right thing here too. And that happens when you have those kinds of relationships that developed through allowing people to be involved with you and being involved in their lives. Number 9, Russian proverb that Ronald Reagan used in the 80s to talk about nuclear arms reduction. He said, trust but verify. And I really like that. I believe that's a really major tenet for good, effective supervision. If you want to, I think it's great. We've talked a lot about trust in previous times. I think trust is one of those things that builds loyalty. But if people know that you're going to trust them, they're going to perform for you. They're going to give you loyalty. But when people know that you're going to trust them, but you're also going to verify those results, it's different. And make sure that people maintains the appropriate skin in the game so that they know, hey, I can't just take corners and do this halfway, because Anthony's going to kind of go check up on it. He's going to maybe see. It doesn't mean that you have to do that on every single thing, but my goodness, if people know you're going to do that, think about the concept of secret shopping, right? That works because people have a sense that they can do their job and everything else, but that somebody's going to try to verify whether that they're doing what they're supposed to do. Sometimes I think about trust and verify as sort of secret shopping for your supervision, right? To make sure that something is doing, that you're going to trust that people are going to do it. You're going to trust that they know how to do it, and that they're going to do it well. And then occasionally you're going to verify it so that they remember that they need to be constant in that they need to know that, yes, I need to do this at all times. How many times have you been in a place where maybe it's a restaurant and the manager's there and the service is great? You go there another time, the manager's not there and the service is horrible. And probably that's part of that is there's probably not enough of a sense of trust but verify. You want your organization to understand that you're going to trust, but you're going to verify the work that they do. And that ensures, I think, for a greater continuity of quality and performance from people. Number 10, walk through your organization at least once a day. Now, this is challenged somewhat by COVID and the remoteness of work sometimes now and the changing dynamics of the workplace. I don't necessarily mean that you have to walk through your building or your location every day or every department. Sometimes you're spread out a thing. But there's digital walking, right? There's digital ways to check into people. There's email, there's a phone call, there's a Zoom call. But I'm a real big believer in trying to walk through your organization at least once a day. You'll be surprised what you find out. You'll be surprised what opportunities come from that experience of walking through your building with people at least literally or digitally. One of the things that I try to do as a habit is I start my day every day pretty much the same way, where I spend a few minutes checking in with the key people that are in my office and just saying hello, seeing how they're doing, sort of giving them some opportunity to help set their day and maybe tell them what things might be important for me to this day, see what kind of challenges that they might be already be having. And you'd be surprised about that. Sometimes when I'm walking across campus and I'm coming back from a meeting, I just stop by one of my other employees' office space and go in there and say hello. And you know, that also contributes well to trust but verify, right? If people know you're walking around and then you're checking things out, that makes it harder for them to not do those work or be working when they need to be working. But it also tells people, look, I'm engaged, I'm involved in that, and I'm available to you. And I've had some really good productive moments with people just by walking around and through my organization. And sometimes I found things out that I needed to find out before they became problems. Sometimes you see something that's an issue by checking in your organization, by walking through it every day, and you realize, oh, and you can't do that sometimes if you don't do it regularly, because you can't tell that something's changed from one time to the next sometimes, because you just don't have enough of a context about it. So walking through your organization at least once a day is a really important tool that's really simple to do, but something that people often neglect in their leadership and their supervision. We've talked a lot about loyalty and trust before in the past, but I'm a big believer that loyalty can be a very powerful motivator. Sometimes we don't get to pick the teams that we work with. Sometimes the teams are already in place when we get there. But I'm a believer that if you really want to have a successful team, you want to create as much loyalty as you can in them. Sometimes you don't have the luxury of that when you start out. So I'm a big believer that, I always believe that when I start someplace new and I have a bunch of people, I want to make sure that they know that I'm glad they're here, and that even if I didn't hire them, that I want to make sure they understand that I would have hired them even if I had been here and I had the opportunity to do that. And that just makes them feel like they owe you a little bit of something, which is perfectly fine. That's not a bad thing if somebody feels a little bit of responsibility to you, a little bit of loyalty to you. I think it makes it easier for me. When I see a little bit of loyalty, it makes it even easier to give people some trust, and it usually begets more trust, more loyalty from them. And so the more trust I give, the more loyalty I get, the more trust I can give, the more loyalty I get back. And so that continues to feed each other. And so sometimes, creating a little loyalty in somebody with a kind word or an encouraging word about them, or something that lets them know that you recognize that who they are, and have them have a little bit of a connection or a um, responsibility to you, can go a long way to helping make that relationship happen. And it's such a little thing, but it's such a powerful thing. I've had bosses who do number 12 all the time. They have to win every battle, every time. I've just realized that sometimes it's just not that important. I don't have to, that I'm not lessened as a supervisor. Sometimes, if I just let that win happen, most of the time, these little wins that you give, sometimes the battles that the energy that you have to expend to win it, for the gain that you get for winning it, is so small. Sometimes I get this on finer points. I have somebody, maybe we agree basically about the major tenets of a plan or a process, and they want to win. They have this one thing that really is important to them, and they fight way too hard for it. And that causes you to want to think, I have to react in the kind, I have to win this battle because this seems to be really important to them. Instead of recognizing that it's really important to them, but it's not to me. And the amount of energy that they're investing and the amount of energy that I'm investing in this is way out of whack for the benefit of that. And so just let them win. It's okay. It's probably not going to alter your plan significantly. And even if it does, is it always the worst thing, or is it really that bad? Now, there are some things you have to win, right? You have to have some battles that you have to win. Sometimes it's because you don't have any choice. You've been given a directive from above you that says this is the way we're going to do that. So you can't. I think it's important that in those moments where you can't let people win, that you have places where you have let them win, that they can get some satisfaction. The worst person is somebody, I think, to work with, is somebody who feels like they never get their way. The other person gets really resentful, and it makes them really unpredictable about how they're going to react to a plan or a solution or something that you want to do, because they might go off and go on their own direction, or they might not give you the output that you need to be successful, because of the resentment of not ever winning has created for them. You don't have to win every battle, every time. Number 13, email is great, but a phone call or visit is better. You notice I just remember I said, hey, look, sometimes I like to just drop into one of my people's offices on the way back from a meeting or something like that. I love email. I think email can be great. But sometimes there's just something different about a phone call or a visit. And this generation, I think the phone call of young people is a text is almost the same as a phone call sometimes to them. So I try really hard to try to send those moments or those things, especially thank yous. I try really hard to send a moment where I say, hey, I call them up and thank them for no other thing. I don't want to talk about anything other than just thanking them for this thing. Or send them a text. It's so easy to do. I almost text as fast as my younger professionals now because one of the best things that's ever happened to my leadership is free text, unlimited texting. So before I was sending so many texts, I'd run over my allotment for that month. And so unlimited texting has been great. So you can send so many because that's just how people communicate. But there's just something about that, being able to do that, but doing those things in person, those little extra things that make people feel a little bit special, just have everything I think to do to helping create the kind of rapport you want with people. And it's really tremendous when you can do that in person or a phone call or whatever thing that generation of young people that are working for you really wants to make them feel special. 14, sometimes one of the hardest things to do as a supervisor, as a boss, is to have your mind changed once a week. You might say, Anthony, why do you want to do this once a week? You're going to see several things that I want people to try to do once a day, once a week. I think part of being good supervision is having habits that people can predict and can count on. And it makes it easier for you to be able to get in a mindset. So if I say to you, hey, have your mind changed once a week. It doesn't mean that that's the only time I want you to have your mind change, but I want you to think about that. I want you to be thinking, hey, I haven't changed my mind this week. Probably my guess is if you got to Thursday and you haven't had your mind changed at least once this week, you probably didn't put enough energy into really analyzing that and making that a priority. And so I think it's really important to be willing to, when you show that you can have your mind changed, I think it can be very encouraging to the people you supervise to say, hey, look, this is not some dictatorship where everything is his or her way. I have the ability to be influential on them and that they value my feedback and input to the point that I was able to change their mind. Some of the best encounters with my bosses have been when I've been able to help them convince them that I of a different way or a different method. And it made me feel very validated as an employee. It made me feel like my performance mattered to the work that we were doing. And that doesn't happen if you don't change your mind ever. That you always know you'll win every battle, and you're going to always be the one that it's your way or the highway. That's a really quick formula for a really unhappy workforce. At the same time, try to teach something once a week. When I talk about how to be supervised well by somebody, I tell them to let your boss teach you something. If you can get both those sides of the equation to work, where you're trying to teach something once a week and they're trying to learn something from you, all of a sudden you have these great opportunities to really connect to each other, to be influential in each other's lives, to be more involved with each other. But also, I find that I really enjoy teaching something, even something small, to one of my employees every week. And I really try to schedule that or find that space in my time to do that. It's really important to me. It's part of the reason I'm doing this YouTube channel now, is that I really want to get in that opportunity where I offer some of the wisdom. To be honest, if you do it for no other reason, that most of us have learned a lot of the things that we know from other people who've taken the time to teach us. I want to pay that forward with some of the knowledge that I've gained from those people. I want to share that with other people. My hope is that you'll do the same by teaching people something every week. Number 16, handwrite notes. Just for the same reasons why you might want a phone call or a text or even a personal visit, handwritten notes just make a huge difference. And here's the thing, I don't like to write a lot. My hands hurt. I've got some arthritis in my hands. So handwriting notes is really a hard thing for me to do. But I've been trying to find ways to get around that a little bit. I've taken my handwriting, turned it into a font, type an electronic message now in my handwriting and send that to people. There's something about the intimacy, the extra effort that it takes to handwrite a note to something. It just feels different. Look, if you can't handwrite a note, sending a note, a thank you note or a note to people is so powerful. But one of the things that I think is even better is if you get a really official note or a letter or an email, and then somebody has taking the time to handwrite a little note onto it makes all the difference. I just recently got a letter from my boss, and at the bottom of it was this handwritten note about my work, and it meant so much to me to see that, and that they would take the time. I'm sure it didn't take that much more time than it would have taken to type out, but it was meant so much to me that they would take the time to write me a little note to encourage me. And I just think that's what handwritten notes do. And I try to do those things where I can. Number 17, ask yourself, did I make somebody different this week? And again, this is about habits, right? I'm trying to get you into the habit of thinking about these things. When I say make somebody different, maybe you taught somebody and you gave them some new skills, but maybe, did what I do matter to somebody? Did I try to do something that helped impact people? Generally speaking, when I say I want to make somebody different, I want to make them different in a positive way. I want to affect their work or their place or their life in a positive manner. I think I had a boss tell me that people don't burn out for having too much to do. They burn out for having too little reason to do it. And that really stuck with me. Sometimes for me, the reason to do it is because I do have this opportunity to be impactful in people's lives. I can do something that can mean something to somebody. Maybe I can do something that helps change somebody in a positive way. So many of us want our work, even in small ways, to mean something more than just simply be the sum of our productivity for the week. We want it to matter. We want it to mean something for other people. We want it to matter to us. We want it to mean something for our lives as well. But if you can adopt the mindset that I'm going to try to do that on a weekly basis, you'll be surprised at how impactful and how much you can change people. It's really an important thing, I think, to consider on a regular basis. Number 18, model what you expect, but know that you're going to fail. I am a big believer in role modeling. I'm also failed many, many, many times at that role modeling, but I'm still convinced that it's super important to be able to do, because I think it tells so many things good about you as a supervisor, but it also teaches so many things to the people that you have working for you. I want people to, I said, have expectations earlier, that I want them to have expectations of me, and I want to try to model what I expect there. So if I want people to do that. And when I fail, I want to see them fail too, because them to see me fail at times, because I want them to know the right and appropriate way to recover from that failure. People often only learn how to do something when they've seen it done for them or with them. And so when you have things that you want from people and you expect from them, when they see that you're able to do that for them, it makes it easier for them to figure out how to do that themselves. And even at times when you fail at those things, it will help them understand how to fail successfully in those things as well. So I think modeling is really important. Number 19. This is important for us all, because we have to remember that being a supervisor is not a full-time job. Sometimes you have to take that hat off. We talked about being a friend, but sometimes we realize that, for a lot of us, our work is really a big part of who we are. But I don't think any of us would say that it's the only part of who we are. And supervision can be exhausting. It can be hard. It can be difficult. It can also be extraordinarily rewarding. But sometimes you have to be able to take that and put it down, so they can be charged up by the other things in our life. Sometimes some of the things about supervision can just be exhausting and draining in a way that if we never recognize that sometimes we have to put that aside so that we can charge up with the other things, we're not going to be very effective when we choose to have to take that back up again. It's just like thinking about an iPad or some kind of other electronic device that has a battery. You don't always be 100% topped off all the way full. You also don't want to be down at zero. Sometimes they say the best thing to do is to charge it to about 80%, right? Us as people, sometimes we have to take a break, and we have to be okay with being charged 80%, allowing ourselves to recover from that. It's not good enough to always be at zero, and it's not really quite healthy to be running at 100% as a supervisor. Sometimes we have to stop, let ourselves recharge, regenerate, and become full again in a way that allows us to come back and do that the next time. And you can only do that if you realize that being a supervisor is not a full-time job. It's not the only thing that you are. And it's also important for people that you supervise to see that you have the ability to manage that balance, negotiate that, but also to give you a sense of that to them, that you're human, that you're a person too, that you're, as much as you might look like a Superman or a Superwoman, that you too have to sometimes take a rest. You too sometimes have to recharge, and that you're not always at 100%, or that or that you have the ability to recover from a really draining experience. It goes back to this idea of modeling, of course, but it's also helping them find the ways to be able to be successful in their own management of themselves by seeing some of the things that their bosses and supervisors do. And if you never understand that, you'll never be successful in helping them understand that too. Friends, as always, I'm super excited. Thank you for being here with us. And until next time, it's Dr. Anthony Donovan telling you thank you. And if you like us, subscribe as well. Do all those things that YouTube people want you to do. Great. But we'll see you next time. Thank you all, friends.